If you watched my first video on Transformers Cyberworld, then you know that even though I was critical, I was still hopeful that things would get better. Well, the next two episodes that I'm gonna talk about today are even worse. So yeah, no time to waste. Spoilers ahead. Episode 3 starts out with Prime and B spying on Scorponok. They see that he is guarding a ship, and then they come to the conclusion that that ship might be their way off this planet and back home. They talk about how Bumblebee is still wounded from his battle with Megatron, and that they shouldn't be putting themselves into conflict just yet. And then they see that a loot crate is spawning far off into the distance, and that the Dinobots, Grimlock and Snarl, are headed that way. Prime says it is a bad idea to go get that loot crate because they shouldn't fight the Dinobots now. Bumblebee is wounded, Prime barely beat Grimlock, it's not worth the risk. But since Prime seems to be competing for like the worst leader in the galaxy award, he lets Bumblebee, the immature one, make the decision for them, and then they end up going after the loot crate, even though we just talked about why that is a stupid decision. So the theme of the episode kind of feels like Prime says something, and then Bumblebee does the opposite, or no, or even worse, right? Prime does the opposite of what he just told B not to do. That actually happens too. They end up going through mud in order to get to the crate, and Prime goes, "Hey B, the mud is deep." Turns around and B is waist deep into it, sinking, right? And you're probably thinking, but Trevor, Prime was too late to tell B that. Well, guess what? Prime is walking in front of Bumblebee on the rocks, rock by rock by rock. B is behind him, fully capable of seeing that this is how Prime is getting across the mud pit. So why on God's green earth would he go, you know what? I'm gonna walk into the mud. That would be smart to do, because it's not. It's so stupid. It's not even immaturity at this point. It's just straight up idiocy. It doesn't come off as charming or likable or quirky. It just makes him look like he's a certified idiot. And then whenever they come into contact with the Dinobots here, Prime looks at B and yet again says that it is not wise to engage with them. So B looks at him and insults them. He's like, "Whoa, who is that rust bucket?" Even though he was just told, not even a second earlier, not to do something like that. It's, oh my gosh, it's unrealistic and it is stupid. But now that the conflict is engaged, let's talk about how they are fighting without stakes. The fight that follows could have been cool, right? If anything, it could have had the weight that the first episodes had. It could have had the actual impact whenever things clashed, whenever punches were thrown, whenever the action happened. But no, B is currently injured, and then he gets blasted by a ton of bullets again, and then he's magically healed. His injury never actually has any burden on him again. It gets brought up by Prime, but we never actually see his injury showcased as an injury. Now it is just words. We don't need an Energon boost to heal him. We don't need that loot crate back there. We don't need a medic, which means that we don't need to have Ratchet or anybody in this show, which is crazy, but I guess we'll see what happens. The injury is just gone. So the fight goes on for a while. Prime tells B, "Hey, go up that cliff, go get the loot box, right? We need to have an upper hand. We need something to give us an edge because our opponents are too strong." Prime ends up actually holding his own by himself really well, and if B would have just went after the loot box like he was told to do, which he would have done if he, actually respected his leader, then they could have won the fight easily, I am sure of it. But instead, even though right now nobody is focused on Bumblebee, he decides that even though Prime is making a sacrifice by holding his own and putting himself in danger, that he is just going to pick up a rock and throw it down there and get their attention, making Prime's entire sacrifice right now absolutely meaningless. He decides that proving himself, which nobody asked for, which doesn't even matter given the fact that he is climbing a freaking rock wall right now, and he can get a weapon, right? He can get the weapon out of the crate and then prove himself. No, that would be smart. So he decides that proving himself is more important than, I don't know, actually causing them to survive this fight. If he went after the crate, he could have went up to it, he could have opened it up, and there could have been a healing supply in there that could have healed that injury, and then everything would make more sense. But they didn't go that route because that would be the smart writing-wise route to go. Instead, he throws this rock. Snarl now has his sights set on Bumblebee, obviously, and then they end up getting surrounded by the Dinobots, back to back, epic looking, and they're going to lose. Snarl even says that your disharmony will be your downfall, which is a really wise quote, and it could have been an actual lesson for the episode, which is something that I said this series lacks given the fact that it is for kids. It is the perfect setup for a lesson about teamwork, about how two people working in harmony can do better than two people working apart. But no, the Autobots luck into getting the crate, they grab some weapons, and then after a fight that lasts, 2 seconds, the Dinobots are like, oh well, we'll pick this up again next time, or something like that, and then they leave. No growth, no payoff, nothing. It's just over, and that is the last scene of the episode. But let's talk about episode 4, where we meet Alita-1. Prime and Bee are walking around, and Bee is showing off his abilities, but he ends up getting whacked by a tunnel, and we see Alita-1 is racing Skybite. She begs Prime and Bee not to interfere in her race, and of course, they do it anyway. The problem with this is that they had to have heard her, because we see that from their side, they are able to hear the splashing of the water as they race by, which means if she is yelling louder than the splashing of that water, then they should be able to hear those words. That is set up in this show. So the entire time she's begging, please Optimus, no, stop, don't intervene. They decide, screw you Alita, we gon' do what we want, and then they intervene. I don't understand. So afterwards, whenever she ends up losing this race because of outside interference, and she gets like a drain, like that XP drain, because she lost, even though she was winning, her anger is completely justified when her first action is yelling at these two for the fact that they just screwed her over. Especially whenever we learn that Skybite, the Sharkticon that she was racing against, wiped out her entire team. He murked Wheeljack. She says herself, Wheeljack is gone. And what does Optimus do after he hears this? After he hears that the bots that he fought beside, that he cared about, that got wiped out whenever he was supposed to be the leader but he wasn't around, what does he do when he hears that news? Does he get emotional? Does he care that they're gone? Is it something that resonates with him and we see a side of him that we don't normally see? No, of course not. He tries to talk things out with Skybite instead. Yup, that's what he does. He tries to have a nice conversation with the guy that we just learned murdered all of those bots, and before this scene actually ended up trying to kill all 3 of them without warning. He's trying to have a conversation with somebody that just freaking fired at him. And you might say, but Trevor, you wanted to see him reason with enemies to confirm his characterization. But here's the thing. In episode 1, Optimus doesn't talk things out with Scorponok at first. They just start fighting, which could have been justified right here. It could have been justified right here because Prime could have seen Scorponok's actions as a threat. He could have been acting in self-defense. And right here, he could have done the same exact thing. That would have set a precedent. It would have set a pattern. It would have made up for what happened before that I had a problem with. But instead, they don't go that route. Why would you do that? That would be smart. Instead, he goes out to talk it out right now, even though it doesn't make sense, which is inconsistent. Completely. Consistency? What is consistency? Remember when I said the earlier fights had weight? Yeah, that is gone. It's not even the video game aesthetic that is the problem. The items in this world are physical. You pick them up, interact with them, destroy them, use them. Anyone can use any item, they aren't even bound per person. So why is Prime getting pinned by an arrow here, but it didn't actually pierce him? How can he break the arrow off if that arrow isn't physical enough to go through him to actually pin him? How does that work? Then there's Bumblebee's reaction to Optimus negotiating. Prime says, "You seem like a reasonable bot," and Bumblebee says, "He does?" Completely surprised by the fact that Prime would go out of cover and try to negotiate like this. But then seconds later, B acts like that's just standard Optimus behavior, which if that was true, then why was he surprised 2 seconds ago? Even though he learned earlier that Skybite murdered Elita's friends, even though we just had a fight with him where he tried to murder us, whenever Skybite starts to retreat, Optimus just lets him go and even criticizes Elita for trying to chase him. Brother man, have some emotional intelligence here. We just learned that she had to watch everyone on her team die because of this guy. He just tried to kill her again, and you, and Bumblebee, but sure, because he's turning tail and running now, all of his crimes no longer matter. That is brainless, that is the stupidest crap, and this is a kid's show, this is a show for young children, and we are establishing the precedent that if someone wrongs you and hurts you over and over and over again, as long as they try to run away, there's nothing you should do about it. That is ridiculous. That is a terrible lesson for a kid's show. Absolutely stupid. There's no justice for her team here. There's no justice for Wheeljack. Just bye-bye. You go on your way, why not? And if he is supposed to be a caring leader, someone that those under him would look up to, someone that Elita would be happy to see again, someone that we should care about, not only the other characters following, but us following the story of, then why would he act so nonchalant when those under him gets killed, and the killer is right there, getting away? If me and my friends were working underneath a boss, and someone came in one day and just killed all of my friends, and then I finally see the boss the next day and I'm like, hey, that guy right there killed all of your employees, he killed all of my coworkers, all of my friends, we have to do something about it. Right now he is turning tail and he is running, which means he is not prepared for the consequences of us catching up. It means that we right now have the upper hand and we can actually do something right here. And my boss got on to me for being mad that I was mad that my coworkers were killed by that guy and I wanted to do something about it. Buddy, we'd be throwing hands right then and there. That would be it, okay? That kind of inconsistency, that kind of bullcrap, that kind of terrible characterization just ticks me off. Which makes the things that seem smaller, like Bumblebee's injury from episode 2, feel like a big deal when everything has this same inconsistent problem. But it's not all terrible. Even though I am very, very mad, Elita steals the show. I just dropped my phone and caught it. That was amazing. In fact, she is now my favorite character of Cyberworld, and there wasn't a reality where I thought this was going to be the outcome. She's angry, yes, but that anger is justified. It doesn't feel like she's trying to be confrontational or she's trying to be rude. Everything she says makes sense because her leader is incompetent. Regardless of that incompetence, she still apologizes out of respect whenever she cools down. She is capable of understanding that she's not necessarily mad at B and Prime for existing. She's mad at the situation that she's been put in. She's mad at the trauma that she has went through. She is mad at Skybite for causing that trauma, and Prime for not even caring to understand it. She understands that her trauma shapes her reactions, and she doesn't take it out on her allies even when it is still justifiable for her to do so. In fact, she actually makes Prime promise that they will eventually get justice for her friends, proving that she is still loyal to Prime and she is principled, but she is loyal to her friends as well. Prime wasn't here through this hell, they were. Now it is time for Prime to step up and make things right. We also learn that XP HP gain means energon gain, but we still have no clue how the drain works, or if it gives energon to someone else or drains energon. I don't really understand it. I believe it's draining energon, but I don't know if it's draining it to give it away, or if it's draining it to put it inside the game. That'll then pop up as the energon boxes, like we saw Grimlock go after in episode 1, I believe. The episode ends with Skybite telling Megatron that Prime is on the planet, and Megatron being disappointed, which is kinda weird, considering their whole bound rivals dynamic that is in almost every iteration. It feels odd that in a world where Megatron can actually prove himself, can actually build his pride up and actually become someone that's known as being powerful yet again, that he would be disappointed that there would be someone there to challenge that, because this entire world is built off of competition. It is built off of besting someone else, and that is Megatron. That is what he wants to do. Having Prime there to compete against should be something that makes him ecstatic. He should be glad for the fact that there is somebody there to challenge his rule, because without that challenge, what does he really have? We see in this scene he's literally sitting alone in the dark doing absolutely nothing. Now he has a reason to go out there and fight, to go out there and make a name for himself, to go out there and actually find someone that's worth his time. So I was really disappointed that he was, well, disappointed. I don't know why they did that. They could have actually set up a really good rivalry and established the freaking dynamic between him and Prime here, gave us something to look forward to, but instead they did it in the worst way possible. I don't get it. Oh, and Skybite is suddenly injured now. I don't know when that happened. I do not remember a single moment in the fight where he would have had his arm and his leg injured to the point that he is limping and holding his arm. I don't remember that happening. Whenever he was running away, he wasn't holding his arm, he wasn't acting injured. It makes no sense to me. Why does injuries matter now when the rest of the freaking series they haven't mattered? Is this injury gonna be gone the next episode? Next time we see him fully healed, no damage, it's like it never happened. I don't know, I hate this, dude. Kids deserve so much better than this, because it is going nowhere fast. The show isn't improving, it is declining. It is going downhill. The writing gets worse every single episode, and ironically, the character that I would have expected to be written the worst ends up being my favorite. Snarl comes in second for his calm intelligence and his understanding of teamwork, something that the Autobots still haven't figured out. The teamwork moments for the Autobots are just random flashes before the fight ends. It reminds me of TMNT 2012, when at first the Turtles struggled to fight together, but then the next fight they just randomly have really good harmony and just magically improve. That bothered me there, but I could justify it based on the fact that all these years they have trained together, where we've never seen a single moment where Bumblebee and Optimus had that kind of chemistry. 4 turtles raised as brothers that start to show off sparring together, and then they have to fight apart instead of fight each other and realize that that is an issue and then can correct it next time. I can see that as more of a realistic change, even if it still felt lazy. Here though, in a show that is already disappointing me, in a show that doesn't have that pre-established bond, it doesn't work and it feels even worse. In the end, Transformers Cyberworld's last 2 episodes have been a massive disappointment. It isn't just failing to live up to its potential, it is actively erasing the few good things that it started with. The writing is all over the place, the fights have lost their weight, both figuratively and literally, and right now out of all the Autobots, Elita is carrying the show on her back, and if they screw her up, I swear to you, I'm gonna be so mad it's not even funny. If they can't keep basic injuries consistent, I doubt that they're going to stick the landing on character arcs, teamwork, or, well, anything. At this point, I'm only watching because of her, and, well, Snarl, I guess, because they deserve better, and I want to see if the writers are brave enough to give that to them. But I am not, and I mean not, holding my breath. I was actually excited. I actually thought it would get better. I wanted a Transformers show that I could, hype up, recommend, care about, Why do we got this trash instead? We'll see when or if I decide to watch the next episode. Alita might be the reason that I keep going, but good golly gosh, dude. We are on thin ice and I'm about to fall through. For more news, reviews, and whatever we choose, stay tuned to Nerdsfeed. Have a great day. Thank you.